Hello, Rejoice family, and those beyond Rejoice. As we come near the end of our season of Lent, we've got this and one more reflection on the Lord's Prayer. And we're at the point where we talk about forgiveness. So, the part of the Lord's Prayer where it says, "Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us," or "Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who, as we forgive our debtors," or as many people are used to saying, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." And every time I hear the traditional version where "Forgive us our trespasses," I'm reminded of a colleague of mine who came back and was sharing the story of one of his kids in his congregation, um, not understanding what trespasses meant. So what they would say is, "Forgive us our trash passing as we forgive those who trespass against us." And there's some wisdom in this mishearing. That, there's wisdom from the mouth of babes sometimes, and this is one of those times where, yes, I mean, there is this sense to where this passing trash about other people back and forth and holding on to it. And, so trespasses and sins, they're the same term. They mean the same thing. It's the way in which someone has transgressed, has offended against us, sin comes from the word, originally from the idea of missing the mark. It's somebody has done something wrong to us. But sin and debt in both Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where the Lord's Prayer is written, are interchangeable. And Matthew uses both versions in his telling of the Lord's Prayer. Luke frequently uses debt and sin interchangeably, and Mark does as well. And again, so if we were to talk about "Forgive us our debts" and "Forgive us our sins," we're talking about two very intertwined realities. But I'm going to bet that if you went to the bank and you took your home loan or your car loan or your student loan and said, "Forgive me my debt," they're going to laugh at you. This is not the way that the world does things. In a world where, it's the "don't get mad, get even," or "don't start a fight but finish it," forgiveness is very different. It's very challenging. It's very hard. And I really have said this many times. Forgiveness is the hardest thing that we do as Christians. It's learning to let go of that grudge, that rage, that sense of power we would have over another person based on what they've done. It's that letting go of that which happened in the past so that there can be a new future. And I'm not going to tell you this is easy. It's not going to happen immediately. It's not one of these things that sometimes it is, at least for me, in my experience, it is a continual choice to say, "I have forgiven this. I refuse to allow this to be that which determines the relationship going forward." It doesn't mean that my mind doesn't remember. It's that I have to continually make the choice to say, "This is not going to be the way that I live. This is not going to be the way in which I'm going to try and hold power or create distance in these relationships." Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount talks about, if your brother or your sister has something against you, leave your gift on the altar and go and make things right with them, and then come back and offer your sacrifice. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus tells a parable of a servant, a slave of a king who has an incredible debt relieved, a debt that nobody could ever pay. 10,000 talents. That was, in that time, more debt than, or more taxes than the entire Judea and Syria and that Middle Eastern area paid to Rome. So it's a huge amount of money. That level of debt is forgiven, and that servant turns around and goes and finds another fellow slave, fellow servant, and grabs him by the neck and wants a very, very modest debt given to him. And I think that this is the dynamic of that "Forgive us our sins," so that as we forgive those who sin against us, or "Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who as we forgive our debtors." it is this sense to where if we are people who have received grace, if we are people who have received forgiveness, if we are people who our relationship with God is out of grace, then I think my understanding of it is God also intends us to live out of that. And I know that's hard. I know that this pulls against everything that we know. And yet it's at the heart of the Christian message. It's so much at the heart of the Christian message that when we come together on Good Friday and we hear the words that Jesus speaks from the cross, one of the sets of words, the words from Luke's gospel, on the cross, what does Jesus say? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Father, don't break relationship with them over this, even though it causes you pain, even though it causes me pain. For they don't understand what they're doing. And so, again, I know this is hard, but we come trying to live into this reality that Christ puts before us. And we ask God to forgive us our sins, to release us from our debts. As we release our debtors, as we forgive those who sin against us, so that we stop passing trash around to each other, so that we stop having all this which comes between us. That we don't have those things when we come together to make our offerings and our praises and everything that separate us one from another. And where we can learn to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and learn to love our neighbor as ourselves, because those things that we would hold against one another have been released. They've been forgiven. And so as we continue to go through this journey in Lent, may you also know that you are forgiven, and may you live out of that forgiveness. Amen.